Winston 90 froze mid-session and called everyone into the room. What he'd just heard from a 12-year-old shouldn't have been possible. Not from someone that young. Not on a first take. And certainly not without warning. The year was 1957, and Orange Street's small recording facility was where Jamaica's sound was being forged. Ken Corey's studio was one of the few professional setups on the island, a place where musicians tried to bottle the rhythm that would later explode as ska and reggae. Most who walked through those doors were veterans, singers and players who'd spent years honing their craft on stages and street corners. But that afternoon, the usual order broke. A thin boy with sharp, observant eyes had been brought in by Bunny Livingston, whose father knew people in the industry. His name was Robert Nesta Marley. He went by Bob. He came from Trenchtown, where survival meant finding beauty in concrete and corrugated steel. Music was his way out, or at least his way through. 90, the engineer, had seen plenty of hopefuls. When Bob appeared, guitar in hand, and barely tall enough to reach the mic stand properly, the veteran's reaction was predictable. Kids didn't belong in professional studios. They were distractions. Expensive tape didn't get wasted on children playing pretend. "You really think this kid is ready?" 90 asked Bunny's father, eyeing Bob's frame, his worn instrument, the quiet way he stood there absorbing every word of doubt. "This isn't a rehearsal space. This gear costs more than most families earn in months." Bob said nothing. He didn't argue, didn't plead his case. He just held that oversized guitar and waited. But his eyes told a different story, one that didn't fit a child's gaze. There was weight there, experience, pain, maybe. Something that suggested he'd already lived more than his 12 years should have allowed. Bunny's father insisted. He'd heard Bob around the neighborhood. He knew what the kid could do. "Just let him try. One song. You'll see." The song was called "Judge Not." Bob had been shaping it for months, a meditation on judgment, morality, and human compassion. The subject matter alone seemed too mature for a boy who hadn't hit 13. But Trenchtown didn't offer the luxury of childhood innocence. Bob had watched poverty carve through lives. He'd seen violence, injustice, families crammed into government yards where hope was a rare commodity. Music wasn't entertainment for him. It was survival. It was language. His background added another layer. His father, Norville Marley, was a white English officer who'd vanished after Bob was born. His mother, Sadella, was a young black Jamaican woman raising him alone. That identity, mixed, marginal, never fully belonging, gave him a lens most kids didn't have. He'd absorbed everything: American R&B, Jamaican folk traditions, gospel, blues. No formal training, just ears, instinct, and endless observation. 90 set up reluctantly. "One take, maybe two if you don't waste my time. After that, we're done." Bob adjusted the microphone, positioned his guitar, closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, something had shifted. The boy was gone. What stood there was someone else, someone who knew exactly why he was in that room. "I'm ready," he said. His voice carried authority that didn't match his size. 90 rolled his eyes and hit record. He expected missed notes, shaky timing, nerves. What came instead made him stop breathing. The opening chords were clean. Simple, but sophisticated. Arranged with an intuition that most trained musicians spend decades chasing. Bob's hands moved across the guitar like they were tracing something inevitable, something that already existed and just needed to be uncovered. Then he began to sing. The voice that emerged was impossible. Rich, controlled, weighted with emotion that had no place coming from a child. Every note landed exactly where it needed to, every phrase shaped with precision and soul. It wasn't just technical skill, it was understanding of rhythm, of space, of how sound could carry meaning beyond words. 90's skepticism evaporated. He leaned forward, listening harder. Other people in the studio noticed. Musicians waiting for their own sessions drifted toward the booth, drawn by something they couldn't name. Derek Morgan, an established ska artist, stopped mid-conversation. "Who's that?" he asked, confused. "That voice sounds like it belongs to someone who's been doing this for decades." 90 raised a hand for silence. He didn't want to interrupt. He'd heard hundreds of amateurs, thousands of takes. This wasn't amateur. This was something rarer. Talent, yes, but beyond that, vision, purpose, a kind of spiritual clarity that didn't announce itself. It just existed. When Bob reached the bridge, the section where the song opened into its plea for understanding and compassion, his voice lifted with a force that seemed to rewire the air in the room. The small studio felt larger, heavier, sacred. The song ended. No one spoke. Engineers, musicians, assistants, everyone stood frozen, as if moving too quickly might shatter what they'd just experienced. 90 finally broke the silence. His voice was softer now, respectful. I've never heard anything like that. Not from someone your age, not from anyone, really." Bob nodded. Not smug, just aware. He knew what he had. He'd always known. Derek Morgan stepped closer, stunned. "You've got something I've never seen before. That performance, it gave me chills. You sound like you've been a professional for years. Where did you learn this?" Bob's answer was simple. "I just sing what I feel. I listen to everything. The city, the people, the birds. I try to put that into the music." The musicians exchanged looks. They were witnessing something generational, something they'd tell people about for the rest of their lives. 90 made a decision. Instead of wrapping the session, he kept the tape rolling. "Let's capture more. This doesn't happen often." Bob recorded several more tracks that afternoon. Each one carried the same depth, the same impossible maturity. By the time the session ended, word was already spreading through Kingston's music community. Calls flooded the studio. Who was the kid? Where did he come from? When could they hear more? Ken Corey, the studio owner, came in to listen. After hearing the playback, he turned to 90 with certainty. "This boy is going to be a star. I can feel it in every note. We need to support him." For Bob, the session was confirmation. He'd always known music was his language, his truth. Now others could hear it too. Those recordings, especially Judge Not, would later be studied as the moment Bob Marley first revealed the full scope of his gift. Historians would analyze the vocal control, the lyrical sophistication, the spiritual weight. But for those in the studio that day, the significance was immediate. They'd watched a 12-year-old walk in and, in a single take, prove he'd been born to do something the world hadn't seen yet. 90 would later reflect that Bob's session changed how he understood music itself. "Before that day, I thought music was entertainment. After Bob, I realized it could be prophecy. It could heal. It could reach into people's souls and change them." Bob understood, even then, that his gift carried responsibility. The power in his voice wasn't just his. It was a tool, one that could bring awareness, healing, and unity to a fractured world. Years later, when Bob Marley's music had spread across continents, when his name was synonymous with reggae and revolution, the people in that Orange Street studio would remember. They'd remember the boy with the oversized guitar, the quiet confidence, the voice that seemed to come from somewhere older, deeper, truer. And they'd remember the lesson he taught them without saying a word. Genius doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't need experience or credentials. When it arrives, it burns through everything in its path: age, doubt, expectation, and announces itself with a clarity that cannot be ignored. Bob Marley found his voice at 12, and for the rest of his life, that voice would sing the world toward something better.